in a world where cinema reigns supreme. Join us on an epic journey through the silver screen. Welcome to What's New with Stu, a movie review, with your host Dave Stewart, a video podcast where every frame tells a story. Get ready for insights, laughs, and film debates. From blockbusters to hidden gems, we've got it all covered. Lights, camera, action. It's time for What's New with Stu, a movie review. And now your host, David F. Stewart. This episode, Planet of the Apes.
They look more or less human, but I think they're mute.
We got off at the wrong stop.
You're supposed to be the optimist, Landon.
Look on the bright side. This is the best they've got around here. In 6 months, we'll be running this planet.
The immortal words of the late great Benny Hill. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, all. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's New with Stu, a movie review. And we will be reviewing the 1968 classic film Planet of the Apes, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, starring Charlton Heston, Roddy McDowall, Kim Hunter, in what is, again, one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, and maybe a film in my top 20 favorite films of all time. I would say I remember seeing this film when I was a kid and it blew me away. I mean, Planet of the Apes, what else can you say as a child? You know, it just was an unbelievable film to watch. It spawned 4 sequels. It spawned the TV show, which didn't last long. It spawned a Tim Burton remake. We'll talk about that a little later. And it spawned, I think, 4 more movies, right, with in the 2000s with Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in the Lord of the Rings films, playing Caesar. But we're going to talk about the 1968 original, which is easily the best film of all of them. I don't think anybody can argue that. I know a lot of the younger kids today are probably going to say, oh, the Andy Serkis versions are better, but trust me, the 68 version, the original, is the best. There's no question about that. It works on so many levels, and it really starts, in my opinion, with Rod Serling, who wrote the original screenplay, and for those of you who don't know what Rod Serling is, if you ever watched The Twilight Zone, he was the creator of that, wrote a lot of the shows, and of course The Twilight Zone is one of the classic science fiction shows of all time. Now, the only problem is with Serling's version, because it's based on a book, which I'll get into a little later. It was set in the future where the apes are flying around in spaceships, and because they didn't have the budget, they decided that they couldn't really adapt Serling's version, so Michael Wilson was brought in to redo what Serling had wrote, but some of Serling's stuff is intact, including the classic ending, which we'll talk about later. Now, Pierre Boulle, or Biol, or I'm not really sure how to pronounce that right, was a French writer. He also wrote the classic book Bridge on the River Kwai, which also was a Oscar-winning film. And he wrote the book called Planet of the Apes. He was French. And I'm not getting into all the details, but I want to explain basically what the premise was about in terms of the book. So you have Jin and Phyllis, who are space explorers, who come across a bottle, and this is in the future, with a manuscript in it. There's a journalist in the year 2050 who was asked by a scientist to go to a planet with him for whatever reason. And because of the time travel continuum, they get to the planet and they realize there's centuries in the future, and they basically realize they're on a planet ruled by apes. And man is just this inferior animal, and the apes are civilized, and the humans don't speak, and the apes are broken up to 3 categories, basically, in terms of society. The gorillas, who are the soldiers, the orangutans, who are the religious people, the conservative political people, pretty much, that run everything, and then you have the liberals, who are the chimpanzees, and they're the scientists. It's very interesting, especially, for the time, and even this day and age, it's an interesting parable to what we're all experiencing now in life. At the end of the book, Jen and Phyllis, they think it's ridiculous that a man could have written this because men aren't intellectually superior enough to they don't have the intelligence to do what he said he did and write this whole thing. But the reason they don't believe it is because you find at the end of the book that Jen and Phyllis are chimpanzees. They're not human, which is a surprise in the book. So that's the kind of shocker. So because they couldn't visually show that in the movie, because how would you hide that fact? It'd be hard to hide the fact they're chimpanzees until the end. But the movie was able to take certain aspects of it and work out its own version of the story. So because they didn't have the budget to put everything into the future with spaceships, they decided to have the apes live in more of a primitive society. So basically, it starts off with Charlton Heston and 3 members of a crew, including one's a woman, and 2 other guys. They're on a spaceship, and he narrates at the beginning.
In less than an hour, we'll finish our 6th month out of Cape Kennedy. 6 months in deep space. According to Dr. Haslein's theory of time in a vehicle traveling nearly the speed of light, the Earth has aged nearly 700 years since we left it. The men who sent us on this journey are long since dead and gone.
You basically realize he's kind of a cynic looking for a better world or a better life.
Does man, that marvel of the universe, that glorious paradox who sent me to the stars, still make war against his brother, keep his neighbor's children starving?
And so they go into a hypersleep, and when they wake up, they realize the spaceship has crashed in water, and it's 2,000 years in the future, as Heston realizes, and he's stunned. The woman doesn't survive. The other 2 gentlemen and Heston, who have all grown beards now and through the getting older, they get out of the ship, which is sunk in the bottom of the water, wherever it is. They basically decide to start roaming the planet, looking for obviously plants and water and so forth. They eventually discover this and a lot of other things, including the apes. Now, I think what makes Planet of the Apes such a great movie, many things, is Charlton Heston. I feel this is one of his best performances. Heston, historically, of course, known for won the Oscar for Ben-Hur, and of course playing Moses in the 10 Commandments. When people think of Heston, they think of those performances. But this is a completely different performance for him. He's a cynic in this movie. He doesn't seem to like people.
I'm a seeker too, but my dreams aren't like yours. I can't help thinking somewhere in the universe there has to be something better than man. Has to be.
He's kind of the opposite of those other characters. Plus, he's running around the whole movie half naked wearing a loincloth, which could not have been easy, so I'm going to give him credit for doing that as well. But he's really good in this film, and it's one of my favorite performances. Just a fun fact, by the way, the 1968 film Planet of the Apes used groundbreaking makeup techniques created by John Chambers. The makeup was so realistic that it made the ape characters seem like human beings. Believe it or not, there was no category for Best Makeup in 1968. Chambers received an honorary Academy Award for his work before the Academy even had a makeup category. In fact, the category for Best Makeup wasn't even created until 1981, after the Academy received complaints that the makeup work in The Elephant Man was not being honored. Now, Planet of the Apes tells you pretty much everything in the title, but I like films that kind of, you go in, you don't know anything. I said, wouldn't it be great to show a movie like Planet of the Apes and not have somebody know what it's about? So I told my son, we're going to watch a movie called Gravity. Now, Gravity had just been released earlier with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, and it's a good film, and Bullock was nominated for Best Actress, and I said, we're going to watch Gravity. It's a space movie. And he said, okay. So I put this on. Of course, it's Planet of the Apes. And by the way, the DVD menu literally has a picture of the ending. I mean, I can't believe whoever made the DVD would put the ending, which is a surprise ending, a still image of it. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, he's watching the film, and when the part comes where Heston first sees the apes, when Heston realizes he's on a planet ruled by apes, the shock in his face, but more importantly, my son, I had just waiting for this moment. I turned to my son, and he's like, Planet of the Apes! Because he had heard about the film, like I had said, and I got him. Anyway, he gets shot in the throat, Heston, immediately after is trying to escape, so he cannot speak. but his mannerisms do show that he's unlike the other humans there. But only one person sees this aspect, and her name is Zira. She calls him Bright Eyes, and so obviously a little bit of attraction between Zira the ape and Heston. So obviously she kind of takes him under her wing. The other apes, especially the conservative orangutans led by Dr. Zayas, do not want to hear anything about that. Man is just, a detriment to everything. They keep the men to experiment on them and maybe to help with transplants or whatever, with, I don't know, maybe blood, to help them. But other than that, in fact, they're even thinking about the gorillas, like, what's even the point of doing this if they exterminate them? Another thing about Planet of the Apes that makes it really great, besides also the societal elements, like I said, about looking at classes of apes, about people that are considered inferior, obviously in 68, going through all that was going through in the country and the war in Vietnam and the clashes of race. So a lot of things could be related to there. But one of the things I really loved about the film was the soundtrack. It's a very experimental type of soundtrack. They used a lot of different ways of making sounds. A lot of instruments and tools were used to give that very weird, provocative, almost very eerie sound. Planet of the Apes is a smart movie. It doesn't condescend to the viewer. I thought the 2001 remake with Tim Burton, which I did not like at all, and he's supposed to be a Planet of the Apes fan, and I did not like that remake. In fact, I made a lot of my family and from friends go, and they all call me Monkey Boy because they were all disappointed in the film as well as I did. In fact, when Heston sees the apes and realizes where he is, it's a shocking moment. When Mark Wahlberg, when he first sees the ape in Tim Burton's version, it's almost as if, oh, well, there's apes on this planet. I never forget, I got to look back on it, but I just remember him feeling like he's not shocked, almost an indifference. Definitely not the shock that Heston sees. And also Burton's version has a lot of humor I don't like. I'll probably touch a little more on that later, but I just couldn't believe the way they shot that. But the script, by getting back to the 1968 version, as you're watching the film, this idea that the humans are the inferior ones, they're the minorities, they're considered no good, even killing them is not against the law, the apes are the superior race. In fact, even within the structure of the apes' world, the orangutans are considered superior, or they consider themselves superior to the chimpanzees. A lot of comparisons to what, again, not only was happening in 68, but what's even happening even up till today. There's a lot of great lines in Planet of the Apes, famous lines in this film.
Security police.
I'm in charge of this man.
No longer, madam. He is now in the custody of the Ministry of Science.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
And when he says that, it's one of the greatest moments in the film. I think it's AFI's top 100 lines of all time. It's definitely in there. And I just want to remind you, if you like what you see, let's do a movie review, hit that like and subscribe button, and make sure you hit that bell icon so you don't miss any future notifications from me about episodes that will be coming up. Now, the ending of Planet of the Apes, of course, for anybody that's seen it, is one of the greatest endings in film history. It's one of the greatest shocking scenes. And at the same time, as shocking as it is, we probably should have expected it, and maybe we did in a way. But we've been given a lot of evidence to realize that it shouldn't be a stunner. But it's not only a stunner for us, I think it's also a stunner for Taylor, the Charlton Heston character.
I've terrified you from the first, Doctor. I still do. You're afraid of me and you hate me. Why?
Because you're a man. His emotions must rule his brain. He must be a warlike creature who gives battle to everything around him, even himself.
At the end of the movie, he realizes that he is still on Earth with that final scene. The bottom line is, there's a lot of evidence that suggests to Taylor and the audience that they're on Earth.
The Forbidden Zone was once a paradise. Your breed made a desert of it ages ago.
One of the things about the film is they're speaking English, which, if you really analyze, well, wait a minute, they must be maybe on Earth, because why would they speak English in a planet far, far away? What are the odds of that? And that's something that doesn't get talked about too much. Maybe that's a weakness of the film if you analyze it from that perspective. Taylor's trying to figure out, how could man evolve from apes? It's one of the last things he says to
It
Zaius.
still doesn't give me the why. A planet where apes evolved from men? There's got to be an answer.
Don't look for it, Taylor. You may not like what you find.
And then, of course, Taylor finds the Statue of Liberty in the stand. By the way, that was really cool. You see Heston's reaction to something, you don't know what it is, and then they don't show the Statue of Liberty. They show parts of it in a hidden way. In fact, every time you watch that film, it's not like it's obvious it's the Statue of Liberty. So even after you know it's the Statue of Liberty, you realize what a great job they did. And then, of course, he has his famous soliloquy.
I'm back. I'm home. All the time. We finally, really did it. You maniacs! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
And it just grabs you. It just really grabs you. It's what he says at the end that makes it such a shocking film. It's a very short couple of lines. And he realizes that not only is he on Earth this whole time, but the reason being so is because there was a nuclear war, and now Earth is gone upside down, that whatever happened, apes evolved from men. And maybe man is smarter than apes overall, but what does it matter when they basically destroyed themselves? It's a stunner of a scene. And what makes it even more powerful, as he's sitting there in the sand, the credits start scrolling, and there's none of that great soundtrack that we had heard earlier. There's no music. In fact, there's nothing at all. All you hear is the laps of the ocean, and it goes to black. And you're sitting there, and you're like, wow. I mean, even now when I watch the film, that ending, because the threat of nuclear war is something that still hangs over us even now. And so, God forbid that ever happens, but it's there. It's not like, 68, oh, that was in 68 that we could blow up the world and ourselves. No, we can still do it today. But when you get to the end of that movie and you see the Statue of Liberty deep in the sand, it's like a punch in the face, a kick in the gut. And it's like Dr. Zaius said to Taylor earlier in the film,
beware the beast man, for he is the devil's pawn. He kills for sport, or lust, or greed. Let him not breed in great numbers, for he will make a desert of his home and yours. Drive him back into his jungle lair, for he is the harbinger of death.
It's kind of a stark, dark realism. And hopefully the image of that film will hopefully got to people enough to go, listen, let's think about what we do with nuclear war or even violence in general. What Zaius says is a warning, and it should be taken seriously. But other than that, on a fun note, it's just a great movie to watch about apes. I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of What's New, What's New, a movie review. I'll see you next time at the movies. And as the late, great Benny Hill would say, good evening, viewers. Good evening, all.